Or good morning to everybody who is online today, and welcome to our webinar broadcast on migrating Cognos disclosure management. We're just going to give it another minute as folks come online. And everybody should be able to see our opening screen there now. Okay, we're close to having a good portion of all the folks who had registered for this webinar online, and I know everybody's time is important, so again, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. And there may even be some online from Europe, from the UK, who I know wanted to participate depending on their availability to come in. So welcome to you if you came online as well. This webinar, as you would have noted from the registration when you registered in, is really designed specifically for existing FSR clients. So if you're currently a user of the Clarity or Cognos financial statement reporting tool, then this webinar is for you. Now, if you are not existing FSR client, that's not a problem. You're welcome to join and stay along with us. However, we do run special webinars for new clients as well. So just so you're on the same one, this is all about migrating from FSR to CDM. So our agenda today, we're going to do a little bit of introduction and objectives. We're going to introduce CDM. Some of you will have seen it in some of our past webinars or in other places, but we're just going to talk to it, introduce it, set the stage for Cognos disclosure management. Then we're going to move right into the reasons and talk about the reasons of migrating to Cognos disclosure management, and to talk about kind of the pros and the cons. And to be honest with you, as you will find out, there's very few cons involved in the transition. And then we're going to go into a live demo, and you're going to see CDM specifically this time in the context of migration. We're going to talk a little bit about licensing and some implementation wrap-up items and Q&A. So while we mention Q&A, by all means, please, as we proceed, you should see on the right your ability in the chat. Please direct your chat questions to Susan, who is online with us here today, and Susan will help us with the questions. So please put questions in as we proceed, and we will be sure to get to those on the Q&A as we come along. So just to introduce who is on the line here from Clear Insight, myself, Ian Margerison, Linda Iguanu from also with Clear Insight, who will be doing a large portion of the session with us today, and she will be taking you through that. And then Susan as well, President of Clear Insight, is here to help and will be supporting us in some of the polls and the questions later. So again, many of you I know have been on some of our previous webinars. And will be well aware of who Clear Insight is. But for those of you that may not, we're an advanced IBM business partner, and we specialize and focus our efforts on the Office of Finance to make the Office of Finance more efficient and to help support you specifically around the products of the original Clarity product for budgeting, planning, and forecasting, Cognos TM1, and of course, as we're talking about today, FSR and CDM, in addition to business intelligence support around Cognos Express and Enterprise. And we have a vast number of consultants who have experience in all these platforms, and we have a good number of happy clients across North America in those various verticals. And so if you folks, anybody on the line is not currently a client of ours, we'd be happy to help you out with any of those solutions, and of course, especially with the FSR to CDM migration that we're talking about today. So our overall session objectives is to talk about the benefits of migrating to CDM, and to the degree that we can, we'll talk about pros and cons, and we're interested in your feedback or any insight or questions you may have or things you've heard. But for the most part, to be honest with you, everything that we have done and experienced with CDM thus far is that there's many reasons to move to CDM from FSR, and so we'll talk about those benefits. Talk about the considerations of migrating, what's involved in migrating, and of course, for those of you who didn't know us, to introduce Clear Insight. So I'd like to move, this is a chance to kind of get our folks all engaged who are on the line with us today, and I would like to bring up the first poll question, and just before Susan does that, the first poll question is we'd like to learn, and for each of you to see for yourselves as well, because you'll see the results, is what level of reporting do you use for FSR today? Pick the most accurate poll question when it pops up. So do you use it for full external SEC reporting and filing with XBRL? Or do you use it for external reporting but you outsource your XBRL elsewhere? Do you use FSR for non-XBRL reporting primarily? Or just for internal reporting? Or as interesting enough, there are a number of folks who have FSR but still have not implemented it. So just as an FYI as well, if you select 1, 2, or 3, that can still include that you do internal reporting, but pick the most accurate that you see there. So I'm going to ask Susan to open the poll question for us now. And you should see the poll showing up there. And I'll ask you to answer the most accurate that you have there for the poll question. Okay, we're getting close. There's the majority of you have voted. If you haven't voted, please take a minute and try and get your vote in there. We'll just close that in another couple of seconds. Okay, Susan, if you want to close the poll. And we'll see the results there. And so, as we can see, just about all of you are really using it for external reporting and for your external filing, but a good number of you still using alternative ways for XBRL. So it's going to fit for you as well as those that are doing it for internal reporting. Okay, maybe we can close that up now, and we'll get to our second poll question. And our second poll question then is, while our first one was more just about external reporting, this question now is to understand, as you do, what types of reports you do. And this is a pick all that apply. So some of you, well, all of you probably are really doing number 1, financial statement reporting. Some of you may or may not be aware of being able to do legal-related documentation, management board reports, or other reports, etc. So we'll open up this second poll question, and should be some good insight for everybody here. Okay, we're about 3/4 of you voted so far. Just give it another few seconds. Okay, very good. Linda, if you want to close it up. And you will see, folks, that again, most of you for your external SEC reporting, others there that financial statement reporting, perhaps just internal board reports. Nobody's doing legal-related documentation. That's something that we could have a question on later, maybe, if you're not sure of how that works. The other thing that comes to mind is if you had a chance to pull down some of the white papers that we referenced in our email invitations that I know many of you had access to. Those white papers spoke about the ability of leveraging FSR and really more predominantly now CDM to help you with your budgeting and forecast reporting and a number of other areas as well. So one of the key things with CDM is that it really does open up the opportunity to leverage the tool for a lot more types of reports than what you currently do, perhaps with FSR. Okay, so thank you for that input and answering those poll questions. I'm now going to turn it over to Linda, and I'm going to make Linda the presenter. So Linda, you should have access to the presentation now.
I need to see your screen.
There it is. Okay, one sec. Okay, there you are, Linda. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you. So thank you, everybody, for being on this call. I'm going to just first of all introduce CDM for those on the call who do not really know what CDM is. So CDM is Cognos Disclosure Management. It is an integrated and comprehensive reporting solution suitable for the management of internal and external reporting. CDM is a second generation reporting solution. The first generation is FSR. CDM combines document, content, and reporting management in a collaborative and secure environment. The CDM solution can be used to create and manage a wide range of reports, whether for internal or external consumption. Some of these reports are actually listed on this slide, as you can see. So most of the reports that is actually listed on the slide are financial reports. But CDM can be used for either the Office of Finance or any reporting that you do within your organization. The good thing, one interesting thing about the creation or the development of CDM is the developers had internal reporting in mind when they developed this solution. So it has a lot of functionalities that actually make it easier to work to produce reports monthly with this solution, as opposed to just doing the periodic, like quarterly or annual reports with the solution. So why should you migrate to CDM? So I've kind of listed a few reasons why you should migrate to CDM. Ian, can you move that? Okay. So the first reason is for for improved overall functionality. So CDM has been improved in terms of functionalities as opposed to what FSR was. Some of the improvements are, at the moment you can edit multiple objects, which is something you couldn't do with FSR. You have improved workflow functionality. Now with workflow is actually inherited by the object. So when you create a report in CDM, you can actually associate that report with a default workflow template, and then every single object that is created within that report inherits that workflow. Improved report generation functionality. This is very important in that when your report is being generated in CDM, it's actually done in the background, which means it gives you access. You can still continue working on your report as the report is being generated, as opposed to FSR, where when you're generating your report or validating your report, you just find that it is that it hangs the system. So technically, you can't do anything. So if you do have performance issues, you just find that the program hangs for about 45 minutes, and you can't do anything. So you can even go out to lunch, come back, and it's still going. So the wonderful thing about CDM in terms of what they've done with this solution is to make sure to ensure processes like this are done in the background so that you can keep working on your report while it's going. You also have enhanced data load functionality, so that with CDM, when you load data, so when you connect to your external source, when you load data, I'm going to demo most of these functionalities later on anyway. So when you load data into CDM, what happens is with FSR, you only have the option to load in the database tab. So you stack the data. So if you had 10 data sources that you were loading from, you will stack it on maybe one database sheet. But in CDM, you have the option to create separate tabs for the different data loads that you're doing. So if you're bringing in data for the balance sheet, for the statement of financial position, you can create a separate database tab for that. Okay, the next one is there is a significant improvement with the PowerPoint integration. So with FSR, you find that the PowerPoint was actually done outside of FSR, where you have to export your data out of FSR in order to get it to work. So as a result of that, many people didn't even bother using it anyway. But there were clients that chose to use it for their presentations and also that they could leverage the variables within their report. But now CDM has PowerPoint within the solution, so that you're working with PowerPoint just like you work with your Word objects and your Excel objects, and you're still leveraging your variables and validations and everything that you do leverage when you work with the Excel and Word objects. So the third option is that you have improved architecture and performance. So most of the processes in CDM have been pushed to the server side, so that a lot of the processes that would have taken a long time. Remember, I talked about the fact that the solution would hang in FSR, for as long as your report is being generated. And of course, if you have things like validation rules, that just makes sure that the performance is even worse than normal. So it will probably take a longer time to generate, and unfortunately, the solution hangs, and you can't do anything. Well, with CDM, because most of the processes are being done on the server side, you have freedom to do, to continue to work on your report. So that functionality, I think, is one of the key things in CDM, because it encourages people to use CDM more for internal reporting as opposed to just using it for external reporting. CDM will integrate quite easily with other IBM Cognos BA solutions, but it would also integrate, like TM1, Cognos Insight. It would also integrate quite well with other databases like SQL databases, DB2, ODBC, or OLAP cubes. So it does integrate with actually more solutions than FSR does. Okay, CDM supports outputs in the following formats: in Word, PDF, Excel, PowerPoint, and as of June 2013, with the new release of CDM 10.2.1, it now supports output in XBRL and EDGAR. So it's more complete now than it was previously. So having said this, what are some of the considerations if you're thinking about migrating? Okay, so if you're thinking about migrating, some of the considerations you have are actually listed up here. So time, the time required for full report migration. The wonderful thing IBM has actually done is provided a migration tool that we can use to help you with the migration. So the migration tool will actually bring in a portion, like 70% or 80% of your FSR reports. However, a lot of work still has to be done after you've post-migration, because not everything actually comes in, obviously. So you have to obviously think about the time it would require for the whole process to be complete, so that your report is actually, you can use it. You can now roll over and use it for future reports. The next thing that we have to think about as well as consideration is costs. So what are the costs associated with migration? You know, it's not just the monetary costs, also, you know, opportunity costs. Are we going to, what is going to happen if we move people from here to there to do the migration? You know, how is that going to impact our division? How is it going to impact the organization as a whole? So cost is very important in this process as well. The next thing to consider is resources. In a way, they're all interconnected, because, well, if you have a lot of resources, then obviously the time and the cost will be much, you know, will be less than if you had just few resources. So resources is very important as well. And with resources, I'm not just obviously only just talking about human resource, even though that is a key one, but other resources. Perhaps, you know, do you have enough, you know, I don't know, do you have enough rooms to bring everybody together? Or does everybody do it separately? I mean, things like that. Just make sure that you have all the resources, or even laptops, you know, all the resources that you would require to get migration going. And of course, select a partner to assist with your migration. ClearInsight can lead the migration for you and kind of be a guide, or we can also do the full migration for you. So migration, and what would it involve? So migration would definitely involve converting your licenses, FSR licenses, to CDM licenses. So Ian will speak more to that in a few minutes, but obviously this makes sense that you will have to convert your licenses to CDM licenses. Migration would also involve determining the level of work required. So this is where an organization like ClearInsight can step in and actually work with you to determine the level of work, having obviously seen the reports that you need to migrate, because this is obviously based on the number of reports. You would, of course, agree that if you're just migrating 2 reports, it's going to take less resource and less time and less you know, cost. It will cost less than to migrate up to 50 reports. So these are the kind of things that you have to consider that are involved, and ClearInsight are obviously in a position to help you to decide this. Training is obviously key. So you have to learn how this new solution works. And all training that ClearInsight provides, all group live training that ClearInsight provides, is approved for CPE credits by NASPA. So for those that are CAs or CPAs, this is obviously very useful. Also, your current report structure and strategies will have to be examined. So we have to go over what the way your report sits today and ensure that you're following the best practices before, obviously, the whole process of migration starts. It's obviously a good idea to obviously move into the new solution having followed best practices. So that will be examined before even before migration itself starts. So now I'll just go into CDM and just demo a few things. But this, the report that I'll be using to do this demonstration is actually a migrated report. Some of you will be familiar with it because it's the same report we used during training for FSR. So just log into CDM. So this is CDM, and of course, many of you will be familiar with Office Supplies Inc. So this is the report that I will be demoing on, and it's the 10K report. So some of the components, I would obviously mention some of the components that are new to CDM, as well as how, when you've migrated, what happens. So I'll come at it from the migration point of view. So the first thing I want to do is actually to generate this report. Remember I said when you generate reports and you validate reports, these reports will be done, the report generation will be done in the background. So it's the same, it's very similar to FSR. So I'm just going to choose to generate it in Word, and it's happening there. So I could just minimize this and continue working on my objects, so working on the reports as the report generation is going on. So this, I think, is a very powerful reason to actually move to CDM. So now that the report has generated, I assume it has. Okay, it has because there's a tick there, so that tells me it's been generated. I have the choice to save it, so I can save it onto my desktop or somewhere else. I have the choice to save it, or I can just open it and view it. So that's the generated report, and obviously that is the validated report, and it's successful. So that is the report that I just generated. So as you can see, this process was done in the background. I could have still continued to edit my objects or work with my objects without any problems. But with FSR, this obviously was impossible because until your process, the generation process ends, you wouldn't be able to edit the object at all. Okay, with CDM, one of the features that is new to CDM is the fact that you can open and edit multiple objects at the same time without any problems. So I could actually open these objects, these 3 objects. So at the top are the objects that are open. So I can open these 3 objects and check them out. So in CDM, when your objects upon migration are actually checked in. So the difference between check-in and check-out is when an object is checked in, it means it's in the pool. Anybody can check it out and use it and work on it. So it's like going to your library, you're checking out a book, and then nobody else obviously has access to that book until it's returned and checked back in. So it's the same thing here. So I can't edit this object until I check it out. So I have to check every single object here out if I want to edit them. Okay, you can actually have an object open, but if it's not checked out, then somebody else can actually open it and check it out. So you have to check it out in order to edit it. So in a way, whoever checks out first wins the race, in a manner of speaking. So in this case, I have checked out 2 objects. So I can now objects because I've checked them out. The good thing about the migration process is that your charts are also migrated. So that is very good. The other thing I want to talk about is the workflow functionality. So the workflow functionality in CDM is, I've already explained a little bit about it before. So when you create an object, a report, like the 10K report, you can actually create a default workflow. So that default workflow is associated with the 10K report, so that when you add objects to the 10K report, those objects will inherit that workflow. So when you migrate, so this is like a tip or a trick. So when you migrate, one of the first things you should probably do is to go in and create a template, a workflow template, so that in case you need to add additional objects to this, to the report itself, you wouldn't have to create a workflow. The workflow will automatically be inherited from the report itself. The object will automatically inherit the workflow from the object itself. So with this, having said this, like I said, these are all these objects are migrated objects. And all as migrated objects, the workflow itself does not come in. It doesn't migrate. So you have to create a new workflow for each object that has migrated. So if I click on this object that was migrated, you can see that obviously there's no there's no workflow in there. There is a placeholder there that shows migration pending, but from our knowledge of FSR, we know you require at least 2 statuses or stages in your workflow creation in order for your workflow to work. So in this case, obviously, this isn't going to work. But at the same time, CDM also has the same similar functionality that FSR has, where you can actually, set workflow at the high level. So you can select all these objects at the same time and just paste a workflow in there. So that can be done as well. Assuming that your workflow, you just need the basic workflow to complete the migration process, and then you can begin to section off your workflow so that you can put them in groups, depending on obviously who works on what. Now, in terms of, like I said, when you migrate, your workflow does not come along, so you have to, that is some part of that 20 to 30% of work, all things being equal, that you get to do when you migrate your reports. On migration, another thing is all your objects are checked in by default. So you have to check any of the objects out if you want to use it or if you want to work on it. So, like I said to you, after migration, one of the first things I did was actually to create, to add a workflow, to associate a workflow to the 10K report, so that if I add an object, automatically that object will inherit the workflow. So I'm going to just add an object to show you what I mean. So I'm going to child, and it's going to be a Word object. This is just for test to show you what I mean. So that is the object I just added, and it's a Word object. So what I'm going to do now is just to click on the workflow object, the workflow button to see. So this should have a workflow in it, yes, because I did create one for it. So like I said, I associated this workflow to the report itself, so that in case I have to create an object, I don't have to worry about workflow going forward. But all your migrated reports have to be, you have to create workflows for those. So in CDM, another thing that we should actually focus on is it's data loading. So when you load data in CDM, I already mentioned this, you have the option to stack it, just like you did with FSR, in one database tab, or you have the option to create separate database tabs for your data sources. Now, for migrated reports, so this is a migrated report. So you could have the data actually showing in the database tab, but this data isn't linked to anything else. So the source is actually broken here, so it doesn't refresh. So one thing upon migration, and I think this is where a lot of the work will have to be done, is that all your data sources have to be relinked with the solution. If you do it carefully, obviously, sometimes you don't have to relink with your display object, with your display tab. But in the most sense, you will have to link to the display. So you have to do that all over again. But if you're following the strategy of object strategy, then it probably means that you have less work to do than if you are linking to every single object within your reports. So the database, like I said, the database link has to be relinked. All your data sources have to be relinked. So I did mention about the PowerPoint integration. So regarding PowerPoint and migration, PowerPoint works differently in CDM than it did in FSR. So what happens is with your PowerPoint object, the source of your PowerPoint object that you had in FSR will migrate without any problems. There's no problem there because it's definitely an Excel object. So that would migrate without a problem. Even the charts themselves will migrate as well. However, in terms of the object itself, you will have to create your presentation within CDM because that is different from FSR. FSR, you have to export that data in your Excel to a source, to an input file outside of FSR. But in CDM, because the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation object is within the solution, then you have to create your presentation all over again within CDM. So the source itself, the Excel object will migrate, but the PowerPoint object has to be created in CDM after migration. So now I just want to briefly talk about another option here. So it's the reference variables. So your reference variables do migrate as well. So I'll just click on that. So all your variables will come in. I haven't seen any instance where it didn't come in. So your variables will come in, just like these did. So that shouldn't be a problem. So all your reference variables will come in, but it's always obviously a good idea after you've migrated to ensure that your variables are coming in and ensure that they're also that they're refreshing as well. But so far, haven't had any problems with that. So, hopefully, that would continue obviously after migration within your own environment. So like I said, IBM has provided a migration tool that we can use to help you to migrate, and that migrates about 70 to 80% of your report. So, that obviously does quite a lot of the work that is done. But there are certain things that you need to know in order, obviously coming with choosing a partner like ClearInsight to help you will, add more value because something that you might figure out that will take you 5 hours to figure out, you'll be able to figure out in a few minutes, and this thing can go a lot faster than if you just did this on your own. Okay, so at the moment, I just want to talk about some of the some of the best ways to use after migration, some of the post-migration tips and tricks. I've actually mentioned a number of them during the demo, just mentioned a number of them during the demo. So first of all, creating, when you do migrate, like I said, one of the first things you should probably do is go into the report itself, the administration part of CDM, and create a template. First of all, create the stages, obviously, according to how your your process works within your organizations, because it differs from one organization to another. So go in there, create all your different stages or statuses, and then use that as your template that you link with the report that you created. So if you're creating a 10K report, an MD&A report, or a 10Q report, create that and then go in, add, associate your workflow to that report, so that in case you're going to add any further objects, you don't have to worry about the workflow portion of that. Okay, so the next option, the next thing that you should do is to generate the entire report. So generate the entire report so that you can see whether the shell of your report, on the surface of it, on the surface of it, all your report should actually look like the report that you had in FSR. So you obviously generate it and compare both reports, and just make sure that it's the same thing, so that at least now you know that what you're doing, most of the work that you get to do are back-end work. Normally when the charts are, for example, I'll just give an example, when charts are migrated, so they're migrated quite well. So you have your charts, just like that report that I migrated, you have your charts. However, the charts are not actually named. So you have, I'll give you an example, you have maybe a revenue chart, but it's all you can see on tax is chart 1, which is the default name that Excel actually gives to charts. But you want it to make more sense, so it would make sense to actually go into all those syntaxes, obviously name all your charts so that it makes sense. People know what charts they're actually looking at without, before they generate the report as well. So like I said, make sure that you generate the report make sure that every single thing that, or at least your report comes in without any problems. And it's obviously the easiest way to find if something is missing from your report. Okay, so all PowerPoint objects obviously have to be recreated, like I said before, because of the differences between how PowerPoint objects work in FSR as well as CDM. So those are things that you should know to change that. Your Excel objects will come in. That is the Excel object that is probably feeding your PowerPoint object, but the PowerPoint presentation has to be recreated in CDM for obvious reasons. So to summarize, I've talked about benefits, so enhanced functionalities. That is a very key reason why you should consider moving to CDM. So, in fact, part of what I actually particularly like about the CDM, Ian, can you go back to the demo just quickly? The demo, not the slide, the CDM itself. Okay, thank you. Okay, so here with CDM, obviously you can toggle across objects and work with the object as is, yeah, together, which is something you didn't do with FSR. Now, or you couldn't do with FSR. Now, there's something else you can also do. So you can work on multiple objects by putting them on a viewer. So I can put this object on a viewer, side by side with another object, check both of them out, and work on both of them simultaneously, no problems. So that is another feature that would obviously, like I said, encourage people to use this for internal and external reporting, because some of these functionalities that were absent in FSR are now present here. So it's easier and it's more, it's a lot easier and in a way more fun working with your reports now than they were in FSR. Okay, just go back to the slide now. Thank you. Okay, so like I said, enhanced functionalities, I've shown a few of those, but there are so many of them, but obviously in 1 hour we don't have time to go through every single one of them. But there are so many of them, and just because of those alone, it's worthwhile, moving to CDM. Now, improved architecture and performance, I showed that one of the examples I showed was by generating the report, but it's the same thing as report. If you're validating your report, all these are done in the background, so you can continue to do your work, and the server takes a lot of this load off the client so that you can continue working on your report without the performance issues that you had previously. So of course, there's increased source data integration, because now you can integrate with more source data than you could with FSR, so that is very useful. The integrated PowerPoint tool, now you can use the PowerPoint functionality and leverage all the advantages of actually working with CDM within the solution itself, instead of having the output and the input file and exporting, and just having those, it's enough to kind of put a lot of people off. So now that it's within the solution, you work with it just like you would, just like you work with your Word objects. So that works really well. IBM has provided a few incentives to encourage organizations to migrate. So some of those incentives I've already mentioned, at least some of, I mentioned one of them, which is that they've provided a migration tool, which we can obviously use to speed up the process. ClearInsight has specifically has special discounted rates for existing FSR clients, especially for the migration project itself. So if you're interested in finding out more, obviously you can let us know so that we can give you a call and have a chat about what you need to, the number of reports that you need to migrate, and just talk to you generally about what might be involved here. And like I mentioned before, all qualifying training are NASBA approved for CPE credits. So your training, depending on what you need, you might need the full 2 days training, in which case you have all the CPE credits associated with those full 2 days, or you could just do 1 day training as well. It all depends on the needs of each client. So some of the considerations, of course, it's a good idea to mention the considerations as well as obviously the benefits. So the consideration cost, like I mentioned, the cost is not just the monetary cost, is also opportunity cost. Are we going to move people from here to there, and how is it going to impact our organization, or do we have to get extra source from external organizations? Yeah, this is something that can be decided, and like I said, an organization like ClearInsight can obviously help you along making that decision. Time required. So the time required has to be, you have to think about the time this way. So it's available time. So what time do I have to get this process done, as well as time available. So at the end of the day, this so you have to think of all the time factors that are related to this project. Do we have time to do this now? And if we do, what is involved? Would it be enough time to complete the process? So these are some of the things to consider. So sufficient resource. Mostly, of course, the resource will be human resource, because at least you would agree that if you have 2 people working on 2 reports, they're probably going to finish earlier than 2 people working on 50 reports, because, well, obviously the resource, the resource isn't, the 2 people for 50 reports does not match the amount of work that needs to be done. So that has to be considered as well. And of course, ClearInsight is obviously open and ready to help any clients who are, who want to consider us as a partner to their migration project. So with this, just like Ian said before, if you have questions, any questions regarding what you've heard today, please keep them coming. Keep those questions coming. If we can't answer the questions online, I promise you, you will get those questions answered offline. We will send you an email. Those of you who sent in questions the last time we had the same similar event, you know that you received answers to those questions. So if you have any questions, please feel very free to send them in, and we'll answer as much as we can on this call. But anyone we can't reach this time, we will send you an email with answers to your question. I promise that. So I do thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand this the presentation over to Ian to continue with the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Linda. Very good, and we're close to the top of the hour, so there's only a couple of points left to cover with folks. Just before I talk about licensing, let me apologize for the slide transition back and forth. There seems to be some embedded timeouts on the slide there, so I apologize, that's what's going on there. So CDM licensing. You are all FSR clients, or for the most part, you're FSR clients. It's probably no surprise to you at this point that indeed IBM has provided an equivalency licensing transition for FSR clients. What that means is that you can take your existing FSR licenses, however many users you have, whatever types of licenses you have, whether you have the XBRL licenses, the non-XBRL licenses, whatever licenses you have, we can take those and we transition them with IBM, and you, in a sense, turn in your FSR licenses and then your reissued CDM licenses at no charge. So it's a fantastic incentive to be able to move to this stronger new product at no charge. What it does mean, though, is you have to, of course, be up on your subscription and support maintenance on FSR. And at the time of transition, you kind of reinitiate your S&S on that. So it's always an ideal time is to transition when your yearly renewal is up, but certainly there's no problem in transitioning in a different time, and we can sort that out with you. So that's one point. Something to keep in mind, however, though, many of you are, and many that we have connected with and are helping, are on FSR back from the original Clarity days. And so many of these clients, and some of you on the line may be like that, where you purchased FSR from Clarity before it became an IBM company. And so you transitioned into IBM, and your contract with IBM may be a flexible contract type, or FCT type. For companies to take advantage of the FSR to CDM licensing, any that are currently still on an FCT type license with IBM, you need to transition to a Passport Advantage type license to take advantage of the licensing transitions. And so that does have some potential impacts, and you just need to be aware of that, and we're happy to talk to you about what's involved in that. Just on the surface, something to keep in mind is some folks had unlimited licensing from Clarity, moved into IBM as FCT contract type clients. If you transition from FSR to CDM and you have unlimited licensing right now, we need to work with you to essentially define how many licenses you do need, and then everything gets reset based on that. So you cannot move into CDM with unlimited licensing that some may have had under FSR. So just a few, and there's other little things to consider, but at the end of the day, it is a free transition from FSR to CDM, and we're happy to work that out with you. Also, it's good to know that you can have both systems running in parallel for at least 12 months, and that way it gives you plenty of time to get everything transitioned over. As Linda communicated, it isn't necessarily a whole lot of work to do, but you have that security and that comfort knowing that you don't have to shut down FSR right away, and so you can keep the two of them running. The server licensing is kind of been adjusted from what some of you may have had under FSR, and you either have 25 or less or 25 or more users. You can get it with the new TM1 advanced option under the covers to do storage of your data within TM1 databases as well, and that's very effective if you currently are not using Cognos Enterprise Express or TM1. And then the licenses are administrator, standard, reviewer, or data collection, and we can help sort out what works best for you there. So hopefully that highlights a little bit about the licensing. Now, just to kind of wrap it up before we go to Q&A, one last poll question is, what are your thoughts about FSR to CDM migration? Now, you may have had thoughts going into the webinar. The webinar may or may not have changed your thoughts, but are you just learning about it? You've decided, you knew about it, decided not to migrate for whatever reason. You're seriously considering options. You're at the stage where you're getting proposals for migrating, or some of you may even be in the process of migrating right now. So Susan, let's open up the poll and get folks to answer that. Okay, we're just about everybody in, and interesting the responses. So just give it another second or two. Okay, Susan, maybe close the poll up now. And let me just make sure that you're seeing this. Right, you are. Okay, so interesting enough, what we have here is almost 50% of you are really just learning about CDM right now. So hopefully this webinar has been helpful for you to understand some things. And of course, we have to go through things relatively quickly in a 1-hour webinar. And we're happy to talk to you directly on additional questions that you may have. Some of you decided not to migrate at this time, and in previous webinars that has to do really with your financial calendar and these things, and those are wise decisions if it makes sense for you, and some of you are seriously considering it. So that's very good. Let's now go back, and we will just go back to, we'll open it up now for Q&A, and I'm not sure if there's any questions that, how many questions are in there, Linda? But if there's some questions there, you can come online and let us know.
Thanks, Ian. We have one question. And the question is, for the workflow, I'm not sure if I understood, but is that workflow editable or is it just inherited for each one?
Okay, so I will answer that question. Okay, so when you, with the workflow, though it's inherited so that, of course, you don't have to worry about workflow. So when you're building the report, of course, many times, you know, you have to go in and add the workflow and all the rest of it. So it's inherited. However, if you wanted to change it, so it's editable as well. So I don't know, Ian, can you show that, I don't know, do you still have the CDM open?
Yeah.
Could you open it so that I can see it?
Okay. Here we are.
Could I see the, because I can't see the CDM itself. Can you open that up?
Yeah, 1 second here.
Okay. Thank you. Well, okay. In the meantime, though, if this will come on, so what I would say is, you also, even though it's inherited, you can go into the object itself and make changes to it. So if you don't want that particular workflow for that particular object or strings of objects, what you can do is, so just give me a minute to do this. So I can just click on it. Let me just use this. So I'll just click on this. And you can obviously create the workflow that you require. So you can still get rid of the workflow that you have and, you know, and change that. So it's not like it's inherited and it's fixed. No, it's inherited, but you have the option to make changes to it. So none of the workflow is fixed. So even though it's inherited, it's only inherited so that you don't have to worry about, you know, do I add a workflow, shouldn't I add the workflow, like in FSR where you have to add the workflow all the time. But with CDM, that isn't obviously an issue because it would inherit it so that you can go along building your objects and creating your objects without any problems.
Thank you, Linda. Ian, there are no more questions right now.
Okay, very good. So we'll just finish up here now then, and thank you all very much for joining us for this hour, and hopefully it was very helpful to you. As you close out, you will have an evaluation feedback form, and we would appreciate everybody who takes a minute just to click on the few items there on that feedback form. And so this will conclude our webinar for now, and thank you very much for your time today. Bye for now.